So what I'm going to do, I've only got one slide for this deliberately, is just to say that one of the things that we needed to do in translating the guideline into practice was to come up with a model of care that, and not every woman sees all these people, so don't worry, we're not suggesting that, was to come up with a model of care that allowed us to make sure that women were getting the best evidence-based care, but actually that the health system could tolerate. It's fine for us in wonderful specialty centres to say that every woman might want to see all of these people, but the reality is it has to be something that you can do in a clinical context. And in fact, the first clinical service that we set up is in a far, far remote north part of Australia, where, I'm not joking, the clinic is held under the local gum tree with our Indigenous population, or on a veranda, because it's very, very hot. It's around often about 40 degrees, humid, and the Indigenous population in Australia don't like being inside, they don't like air conditioning. So more often than not, the clinic that we actually first did this in, which is run by general practitioners and women's health providers and nurses, was actually done on the veranda or under the tree in a very remote area in Australia. And we picked that area first just because that was a real area of need. These women, 1/3 of our Indigenous population have PCOS. They have really severe central obesity and even worse metabolic profiles than our South Asian population. So we set it up there, and it was run by our primary care providers. They all went through a brief but very targeted training program, and we gave them all the resources for the women and trained up one of their nurses to do the education. So the women came in, they had a group education session with the nurse. So most of the time that you spend in your practice explaining things the same way time after time was actually done by the nurse in a big group at the start. And then they saw the specialist, or actually here they saw the general practitioner. In our other models of care they saw the specialist, and then they went on to see, if appropriate, many of them would then see a dietitian. But often they didn't, they just saw the nurse and the doctor. We managed to show that the service was very well appreciated, that it was following evidence-based practice, that it was quite affordable and worked within our health system, and that many of the outcomes were significantly improved. So then when we finished this guideline, we set up a new model of care which we're now taking across the country, where each state has one. I don't know how many. Is India broken into states? Do you have small... You have states? Yeah, okay. So in Australia we have 7 of them, and they're geographically large but not a huge population. But what we've aimed to do is, in each state we're aiming to have one centre of excellence or clinic where women can come to get fully assessed, seen once or twice, and then go back out into the community with their app, their education, their information, and manage their own care with the health practitioners. We talked about this yesterday. We're never going to get all the healthcare providers on board. We're never going to get psychologists and dietitians and others and all our reproductive health colleagues and endocrinologists to know enough about this condition. But if we arm women with more evidence-based information, give them the app and give them other resources, they can take more of a coordinating role. So the idea is that these services, they'll come in twice, maybe 3 times. As I said, we offer them free laser, which is something that they really value. The laser itself is very easy to do, and you don't need a lot of training to do it. It's just the initial purchase of the laser that's costly. But essentially these women come in and they are provided with a nurse-led education. They see a specialist in the clinic. If I need advice from the gynaecologist, I get the advice from the gynaecologist there. If the gynaecologist is seeing them and needs advice from me, they ask me. We don't get the patient to go around and see multiple people, and it's also not efficient. We just cross-reference with each other. And then there is a dietitian in the clinic who sees them in groups, and if they're really resistant, then sees them individually. And they all get the support program and the education. So that's the model of care we've set up, and within that we do some limited ovulation induction, which is actually run by one of our gynaecologists who is a reproductive endocrinologist in that service, but it's not the main focus of the treatment in that context. In fact, what happens is our very large IVF and reproductive endocrinology group actually refer all their women with PCOS to us first. So we see them in the clinic, they're educated, the dietitian sees them, we do all the hard work, which they're very happy about, screen their emotional well-being, address all that, and they go to the reproductive endocrinologist primarily for their fertility treatment. So that system actually works really well. So that's the model of care that we've set up at state-based, and Rob has subsequently set up a slightly different focused clinic in his state, and then the other states around the country are now setting up their own services as we move for people to be able to do that. We can also offer remote consultations. So for those of you who don't know a lot about Australia, it's huge. From a geographical point of view, it's about as big as the US. It's a bigger landmass than Europe, and it has 24 million people. So there's an awful lot of land and not very many people, very opposite to India. But it does mean that there's a lot of people who are a long way from practice. So we will often do our consultations online, and that service is available through this as well.